We've got a long one today, so we're going to dive right in with another video addressing this comment. If you want the full context for what we're discussing, you may want to watch my Veilguard video, as well as part 1 of my response to this comment. I'll link both videos in the description box. This comment was left in response to me saying that, typically, we expect a well-written protagonist to be at least one of 3 things. Because the protagonist isn't just a character going through an interesting story, they should be the character who is going to teach us the most about the themes. I suggested in my Veilguard video that Rook is a weak protagonist because they don't tick off any of these boxes meaningfully. This commenter disagreed. I've already responded to this first point of theirs in another video, but this second point was in response to me saying the protagonist should have a skill or perspective that makes them the best character to solve the problem of the story. And this commenter believes that Rook's blood magic connection with Solas satisfies this criteria. I'm going to divide my response into 3 sections. First, why justifying Rook as the protagonist because of their blood magic connection with Solas is weak storytelling. Second, why Rook's blood magic connection with Solas, at least as currently written, causes some massive problems for the story. And third, we're going to workshop solutions the writers could potentially have used so that Rook's blood magic connection with Solas not only ticked off this box, but could have even fixed other issues in the writing. Win-win, right? Let's get to it. To a degree, this commenter has a point that Rook's connection to Solas does give Rook a unique perspective and skill that directly ties into the objective of the story. They need Solas's advice to save the world. Rook is the only one who can get it. It's far more interesting to witness Solas's advice firsthand through Rook's perspective. Not only that, but Solas himself is instrumental in saving the day, and the blood magic connection is what allows him to escape the prison of regret. In a superficial sense, this unique skill and perspective of Rook's would seem to tick off this criteria on my litmus test. And I think it's exactly what the writers intended to justify Rook as the protagonist. But writing is hard, and once again, the writing for Veilguard gets in its own way until this doesn't work. But before we get into why it doesn't work, just for a moment, let's pretend that it does. Because even if this did justify Rook as the protagonist, it would still make Rook a weak protagonist. Remember in my last video how I said that whatever quality the main character has that makes them a suitable protagonist, whether that be bravery, humility, or some other quality, that quality should provide commentary on the themes of the story. In Pride and Prejudice, which largely centers on themes of, well, pride and prejudice, our protagonist, Lizzie, and our antagonist, Mr. Darcy, are both 2 of the most prideful and prejudiced people in this story. When Mr. Darcy wounds Lizzie's pride,
she is tolerable, I suppose. But she's not handsome enough to tempt me.
She becomes so prejudiced against him that she eagerly looks for opportunities to talk smack about him and willfully misinterprets everything he says and does as arrogance.
I don't see Mr. Bingley and his friends here this evening.
I think some of Mr. Bingley's friends would consider it beneath their dignity.
Really?
While other characters also find Mr. Darcy
Such a proud, disagreeable man.
No one revels in disliking Darcy quite the way Lizzie and Mr. Wickham do. And Mr. Darcy, even though he's mostly a really good person, he easily attracts the ire of others because his own pride and prejudice makes him come across as arrogant and
ill-qualified to recommend myself to strangers.
Both Mr. Darcy and Lizzie have to recognize their flaws and overcome their pride and prejudice by the end of the novel in order to be together. No 2 other characters in this story could convey these themes as well as Lizzie and Mr. Darcy do. But while Rook having a mental connection with Solas does make them stand out from the other characters in the story, it doesn't make them unique in a way that says anything profound about the story's themes of pride or regret. Because Rook didn't choose to form this bond with Solas out of pride or regret. Rook didn't choose to form this bond with Solas at all. Likewise, Solas didn't choose Rook because Rook's pride or guilt made them the best candidate for the bond. The only reason Rook obtained this connection with Solas is because they happened to be the one to bleed at the ritual site. If a particularly intelligent Nug had bled at the ritual site instead of Rook, Solas would have been forced to form a bond with it instead and train it to deliver messages to Leliana or something. Rook, being the protagonist of Veilguard, has nothing to do with Rook at all. Rook is the hero by chance. Which means Rook gaining this ability doesn't send any kind of thematic message. Does that mean that you can never write a story where a character becomes the hero by chance? Well, yes and no. You can certainly write characters who gain abilities by chance, but if they do, we usually like to see that mastering that ability takes work. And how the character masters that ability should reveal thematic traits about them. You could definitely argue that Aang is the hero of Avatar: The Last Airbender by chance. He didn't really have to do anything to become the Avatar except to be born exceptional. However, the main themes of Aang's character arc throughout the series are about him accepting his role as Avatar and learning to stop running away from problems and difficult choices. With each new element Aang learns to bend, or each new Avatar ability Aang unlocks, the show uses it as an opportunity to teach Aang to stop running away. The first season focuses more on Katara learning waterbending than it does Aang, and yet we still get to see a tiny hint of Aang's propensity to run away. When Katara learns Master Pakku is sexist and won't teach her, Aang's immediate instinct is to just leave.
If you won't teach Katara, then...
Then what?
Then I won't learn from you.
Katara has to convince Aang that he needs to learn from Master Pakku even if he's an awful person. When Aang learns earthbending, we have an entire episode devoted to Toph teaching Aang to face his opponents and his problems head-on rather than trying to avoid them. With firebending, after accidentally burning Katara, Aang outright refuses to learn firebending until Zuko offers to be his teacher and shows he understands the danger of fire. Even then, Aang is reluctant to learn and very timid with firebending until they learn the positive sides of firebending from the firebending masters. The show later drops the ball by using Deus Ex Machina to give Aang the Avatar state back after he both literally and figuratively ran away when Guru Patik told him he'd never be able to master the Avatar state until he'd in some way resolved his attachment to Katara. The show just kind of swept that under the rug and pretended it didn't happen, didn't have Aang learn anything from this, and then rewarded him for running away by giving him the Avatar state anyway, which was not great. But for the most part, the show does a really good job in having Aang learn important thematic lessons as he develops his Avatar abilities. Veilguard isn't the first Dragon Age game to have a protagonist who gained a special ability by chance. Inquisition also does this. But in Inquisition's case, the Inquisitor's anchor is just a key, a very, very important key, but the anchor is not interesting or useful on its own. The Inquisitor still has to figure out how to use this tool effectively, and it's the Inquisitor's actions that make the tool useful and interesting. If we imagined the anchor as a sword, then the Inquisitor still has to become a swordmaster. But the use of the anchor in Inquisition also interacts with the game's themes. Inquisition's themes deal a lot with faith and the pursuit of truth. The Inquisitor first gains the anchor by intervening at the Conclave to try to save a faith leader. Many of the Inquisitor's actions using the anchor lead to others viewing them as the Herald of Andraste, a religious figure. The Inquisitor can either lean into that belief, that association, or they can try to distance themselves from it. But either way, as they build friendships or rivalries with their companions will either lose faith in the Inquisitor and may leave, or they will put their faith in the Inquisitor and fight by their side. As far as I can tell, Rook's special ability is neither gained nor really utilized in connection to the themes of the game, apart from a few thematic conversations Rook has with Solas, which doesn't really make the ability in and of itself thematic in any way. Rook also doesn't have to do anything to master their ability. The game pretends like you have to work hard to convince Solas to work with you, but the reality is you don't have to convince him of anything. Solas may posture, he may opine, but that's all just part of his manipulation of Rook. He is going to give you the information you need because his only other choice is abject failure. You are his only means of accomplishing what he wants. Rook has the upper hand the whole time, but lets Solas play them like a lute. This means Rook does not have an interesting perspective or skill of their own here. They didn't have to do anything to earn this ability, they didn't have to do anything to master it, and they don't even really have to deal with the social ramifications their blood magic connection with Solas should have. Rather than Rook being a skilled, interesting character in their own right, Rook's special ability is effectively to defer to someone else who is more intelligent and capable than them and gets the themes across better. Rook's special ability is to give the audience screen time with a more interesting character. They're just a conduit to someone who outshines them. If the anchor is a sword and the Inquisitor a sword master, then Rook is someone being mastered by a guy with a sword. In my last video, I pointed out why the themes of the game meant Rook's personal motivation had to be guilt, because the themes are about guilt. But Veilguard's themes aren't just about guilt and pride. To be more specific, they're about how guilt and pride impact leadership. The baddies aren't just baddies because they're arrogant. Elgar'nan and Gillenane are so dangerous because they are prideful leaders. Solas caused all of the mayhem with his rebellion and the Veil because he was a prideful leader. We are told Mythal was so wonderful because she was a benevolent leader. Now, your mileage may vary on that, but that is what we're told about her. Where we do see Mythal go wrong is when she too becomes too proud to listen to her servant's wisdom and advice until it's too late. Even smaller plotlines in the game, such as with the First Warden, exist to further this theme of how leaders make poor decisions when they are too prideful to listen to the advice of those under their charge. One of the main ways stories tend to get their themes across is by juxtaposing the protagonist and their ideology with the antagonists, which is true for Veilguard. The entire plot structure of the game sets up Rook and their leadership style to be juxtaposed with Solas. The inciting incident, for example, has Rook take a well-intentioned action that has unforeseen deadly consequences, an act which mirrors the action Solas took when he too, in a desperate moment, did something well-intentioned but catastrophic. Both characters are imprisoned by their regrets and are on, or at least should be on, a journey of redemption where they try to undo the harm of their mistakes. By making Solas's and Rook's stories similar, it highlights where they are different and why Rook is able to overcome their guilt while Solas can't without help. A lot of Veilguard's themes are very heavy-handed, but I mostly liked how Veilguard handled this theme of leadership with Solas and Rook. We get to see these memories of Solas and how he believed he was the only one who could accomplish what needed to be done. He didn't trust his followers to have insights he needed to entertain. He didn't believe he needed his followers for emotional and moral support, and so, out of pride, Solas was secretive and manipulative. He isolated himself, keeping his true plans to himself. Contrast that to these scenes we get with a humbler Rook speaking together with their team with full transparency and respect. Yes, some of these scenes go on a little too long, get too explainy, and feel a little like babysitting, but the concept of depicting Rook relying on their team for advice and potentially correction is beautiful. It wonderfully contrasts Rook's and Solas's leadership styles. All this is to say that for Veilguard to be able to get across the message about leadership it's trying to get across, Rook can't just be a protagonist who feels guilty. They have to be a leader who overcomes their guilt through humility to show how Solas's pride prevents him from doing the same, prevents him from being a good leader. At some point in the story, Rook has to be the leader of the team. But Raelyn, you say, Rook is the leader of the team, so what exactly is the problem? The problem is with Rook's mental connection with Solas. Because while it makes Rook unique enough to be an interesting lens for a story, it's exactly the reason Rook cannot be the leader in this story. Because in order for the audience to accept that Rook has this connection with Solas, that their teammates know about it and are still okay with taking orders from Rook, it requires the audience to completely disregard 3 entire games worth of world building surrounding blood magic. The vast majority of Thedas is deeply distrusting of blood magic. Even in the corrupt magocracy of Tevinter, people distrust blood magic enough that the ruling class won't openly use it. False claims about Dalish elves using blood magic have further stigmatized them. The Dragon Age wiki even states that fear of blood magic is strong enough that even non-magical fields of research, like anatomical studies, have been placed under suspicion. One of the only groups to accept blood mages readily are the Grey Wardens, who frequently go on suicide missions, and even they are distrusted and at times condemned for their acceptance of blood magic. This means your companions in Veilguard would probably take orders from a Mabari long before they took any orders from Rook, who they know has been compromised by blood magic and still may very well be being manipulated. Not just by any blood mage, but specifically by the very mage some of them have been trying for as much as 10 years to stop. One of the most powerful mages, not just of the here and now, but to have ever walked Thedas. To throw Veilguard a bone, it's not the first Dragon Age game to play fast and loose with blood magic lore. In both Origins and Dragon Age 2, the player can specialize in blood magic, and they'll barely get a complaint from their companions if they do. But just because past games did this, doesn't make this good writing now. This was not ideal writing then either, and it was a contradiction that players of blood mages found immersion-breaking and silly at best. By the time we got to Inquisition, the developers opted to not make the blood mage specialization available at all, because they knew that to do it justice would require a lot more reactivity from other characters than they were prepared to do. But even though past games sometimes messed up or ignored blood magic lore, there is still a major difference here between Veilguard and the earlier games. In the earlier games, blood mage was just one potential specialization of many that the game had to account for. It was a side detail, optional content. It was never the point of the story. But in Veilguard, the blood magic isn't just a tiny optional detail. It's a feature. It's a core part of the main storyline. You can't just hand-wave away all the world building that came before because it's inconvenient for you now. That's lazy writing. You have to find a way to deal with this problem. But Rook's blood magic connection with Solas is actually worse than just a conflict with the world building, because for Rook's companions to know that Rook has been compromised by Solas, for them to unquestioningly obey Rook anyway, for them to take no extra precautions, only for them to completely predictably find out that Solas was manipulating Rook through blood magic all along, well, it makes them all look very, very stupid. Your companions are supposed to be competent, intelligent people. They're supposed to be experts, the best of the best that Thedas has to offer. They should be making the best, brightest decisions they can with the information they have. But this choice to have them unquestioningly follow the target of a blood mage not only contradicts 15 years of world building for Thedas, but it also undermines every last companion character in the game and makes them all look foolish and incompetent. Like, they had contingency plans for if Spite took control of Lucanus.
Lucanus, if you lose control of Spite, I'll have to put you both down. No hard feelings.
Did no one have a contingency plan in case Solas took control of Rook? Not one person? If we're being honest to the world of Thedas, then as wary as these characters are about Lucanus, they should be far more wary of Rook. Solas is far more dangerous, far more powerful, and far less predictable than Spite. These companions might be sympathetic to what Rook is going through, but it's unlikely they'd accept Rook as their leader without contest. At best, they'd probably use Rook as an advisor, and they very likely would keep Rook in the dark about most of their plans, sharing with Rook only the bare minimum they had to for Rook to be able to play telephone with Solas. And they would be extra wary of seeing Rook talking to thin air every time Rook thinks they're talking to Varric. The companion characters would not have brushed that off the way they did in Veilguard. So, to recap, Rook being the leader while having this blood magic connection with Solas contradicts the world building, undermines the companions, and it's one more reason it's hard to believe Rook could go this whole time without realizing Varric is dead. Unfortunately, any way you slice it, Rook's blood magic connection with Solas, while it should be the reason Rook is the focal point of the story, it ends up causing problems for the story. If the writers wanted to tell this story with these themes about leadership, then they needed to find a way to allow Rook to both be the leader of the team and to have a blood magic connection to Solas. But instead of doing the work to iron out those kinks, they pulled an avatar and they just swept it under the rug. The good news is there are ways to fix this problem and allow Rook to be the leader of the team even while compromised by blood magic. I thought we'd discuss a few of the fixes I came up with to show you how you can not only fix a plot hole, but you can even rework it until the story becomes stronger than it would have been without it. The first potential fix I came up with is simply having Rook specifically seek out companions who have lax views on blood magic. The companions following Rook despite knowing of the blood magic becomes believable instead of immersion breaking if we know that they were specifically recruited because they were unbothered by blood magic. In some ways, I think this is the fix most fans would approve of, because this allows for Rook to be both the leader and protagonist without requiring Rook to be fleshed out as a character. It means gamers could have been given more control of Rook's personality and backstory, and it could have opened up a lot of neat gameplay options. Is Rook comfortable hiring all these people who have unpopular views on blood magic, or are they at odds with their pro-blood magic companions? Does Rook feel curious about their blood magic connection with Solas? Do they want to take advantage of it? Or do they feel tainted by it? Let the gamer decide. There's the potential to delve more deeply into the lore surrounding blood magic as well, looking at how good people might turn to it, how corrupt people might exploit it, how prideful people might be susceptible to it, and how someone like Solas might use it in ways we've never thought of before. The downside, although I hesitate to call it a downside because I think many Dragon Age fans would have preferred this, is that much of the game would have to be rewritten to be more morally grey. What others have referred to as Veilguard's Disney-fied tone would have to go out the door. Because the very nature of Rook recruiting people who were okay with blood magic means that the companions would be more unscrupulous sorts, who were steeped in corruption, or at the very least were outcasts. Some of the companions might be decent folk, but their lax views on blood magic would make them very unwelcome in ordinary society. My second fix is the one that requires the least rewriting of Veilguard, which is to go the Inquisition route. Just like the Anchor made the Inquisitor essential to saving the day, give Rook some concrete ability beyond being able to talk to Solas that makes them essential to fighting the gods. Someone in the comments of my Veilguard video suggested that if having Solas in Rook's head had also given Rook other abilities, such as being the only one who could operate Solas's network of Illuvians, that might make Rook leadership material. The companions might be forced to concede that even though they are wary of having Rook as their leader, their need of Rook's abilities outweighs their fear of blood magic. I think the Illuvians is a great idea, but instead, or maybe on top of that, my instinct would be to make Rook the only one besides Solas who can activate the Lyrium dagger. It means Rook would have to be the one to land the killing blow on the gods, because without Rook or Solas, the dagger is just a pretty bauble. The upside to this is it reinforces Rook as the hero. Rook is quite literally the only one who can save the day. It also reinforces the importance of the Lyrium dagger, and it means that Rook now has a tool that they have to master, hopefully in a way that uplifts the themes of pride and regret. It also emphasizes and expands Rook's connection to Solas, foreshadowing that their connection may go beyond sharing dreams. There's also the potential to tie this into the themes via story and gameplay. Maybe being the only one who can save the world starts to make Rook prideful. Maybe they start to lose companions. Maybe they're unable to gain all the allies they need because of their pride. Maybe some of the quests go devastatingly wrong if Rook makes poor choices out of pride, believing that they are too strong or skilled to be stopped. Perhaps the dagger can gain or lose abilities that are locked behind choices Rook makes that represent either pride or humility. Conversely, if Rook is able to maintain their humility, maybe they're able to achieve the best outcomes at the end of the game. All just some ideas to tie Rook's abilities into the themes. The downside is that, once again, the ripple effects of this change would require some rewriting of the story. The companions would have to be much more questioning of Rook's leadership, because they should still be wary of it even if they know Rook has to be the one in charge. They should frequently be asking questions like, does this order come from you or from Solas? It would take Rook a while to earn the trust of their companions. It would also require some rewriting of Lucanus. Since Rook has to be the assassin, that can't be Lucanus's job anymore. He'd either have to have a new reason to be on the team altogether, or he'd be acting more as a mentor figure for Rook, helping to train them to be the best assassin they can. A third option is to do what I suggested in my Veilguard video. Emphasize that Rook is special because there's someone Solas doesn't know and can't predict. In this fix, I imagine the companions would demote Rook after learning about the blood magic. Other members of the team would try to fill the leadership role in Rook's stead. I would structure the game so that each companion took a turn leading some important mission, but they'd soon learn that their reputation preceded them and the mission would go sour. Remember, each of the companions is well known in their respective field, so Elgar'nan and Gillenane would likely have informants who know the companions well and can predict how they'll act. So every mission led by one of your companions would end up getting thwarted. Rook, who was just there to tag along, would have to step up and save the mission, earning their companions' trust little by little, until the companions all agreed that despite the blood magic, Rook really was the wild card they needed leading the team. The upside to this is that there is a fantastic opportunity here to deepen Rook's relationship with the companion characters beyond what Veilguard managed, because Rook would have to work really hard to earn the trust of their companions during these trust-building missions. Rather than having all the companions get along from the start, having to earn the companions' trust and friendship, it would give the player a sense of accomplishment, and it makes the whole friendship is magic aspect of the game shine. Another potential upside to this fix is that it could make the dragon attacks on Minrathous and Treviso much more compelling. A lot of people have complained that the choice between saving Minrathous and Treviso feels incredibly arbitrary, and for one of the cities to fall simply because Rook wasn't there, well, it feels absurd, and it makes either the Shadowhunters or the Crows look kind of pathetic for not being able to protect their home turf just because one person wasn't there. But Rook making all the difference in the fight makes more sense if we know that Rook's companions and the leaders of the Crows and Shadowhunters are known to the gods, and their plans to save the cities are not only predictable to the gods, but also exploitable in disastrous ways. I'd have the companions split into two teams, each going to a different city. In both cities, the companions' plans get anticipated and sabotaged by agents of the gods. Rook, due to their unpredictability, is able to salvage the mission for the team they're on, but whatever team they're not on would fail disastrously because they were too predictable without Rook. The mission to save Minrathous or Treviso would serve to show the companion characters what the prologue mission I mentioned in my first video showed Varric, that Rook's lack of notoriety makes them the best leader, even if it means risking Solas's influence. There would also be this interesting conflict where Rook needs to be the leader because they're the one least known by Solas, but the more they use this ability in contacting Solas, the more Solas gets to know them. But the downside, once again, is that this does require a lot of rewriting, not just of dialogue, but also of companion quests and side quests in order to have those trust-building missions and highlight how Rook swoops in when their companions' plans fail. So those first three fixes I came up with all allow for Rook to be the leader of the team while having this blood magic connection with Solas, but that's just a start. In each of these fixes, the writers would still need to do the work to make sure that Rook's abilities, actions, consequences, and perspective supported the themes of the story. But we still have one more fix I came up with. I'm going to go into a lot more detail for my final fix because it's my personal favorite and because I think that this would strengthen several aspects of the story that the writers were trying to tell. However, I do have to acknowledge that in some ways, this is the worst fix I came up with because this fleshes Rook out as a character far more than the other options, and it takes more choices away from the gamer. It would require Rook to make choices the gamer might never have wanted them to make. So this is probably not the best fix for a Dragon Age style RPG. However, since I am not a game writer and am a novelist, and since this channel is primarily geared toward my fellow novelists, let's take a look at how my final fix could improve several aspects of the story. As much as I said I really love the idea of contrasting Solas's and Rook's leadership styles by showing how open Rook is with their companions, I actually would not have Rook start out being that kind of leader. Not yet. In the beginning, Rook would actually share some of Solas's ideology about leadership. If anyone here watched my video critiquing Thor Ragnarok, I mentioned that sometimes your protagonist and antagonist begin with opposing ideologies. But other times, your protagonist can start the story believing the very same thing the antagonist does, but over the course of the story, they learn that they were wrong and switch sides, and that's what I would do with Rook here. Upon first learning Solas used blood magic on them, I would have Rook wake up and blurt out something about Solas and blood magic before they'd fully regained their senses. Imaginary Varric overhears this outburst. Since Imaginary Varric is really just a figment of Rook's imagination and a vessel for Rook to express and work through their own worries, I would have Varric warn Rook of exactly what Rook fears, that their team won't listen to them and might even boot them off the team if they know Rook has had blood magic used on them. Our Rook feels deeply guilty about setting the gods free, and due to a little pride of their own, Rook believes they have to be the one on the team that takes the gods down and sets things right. It must be them leading the team to victory, or they won't be able to relieve their guilt. See how they're sounding a little like Solas? But our Rook would convince Imaginary Varric to keep this whole blood magic ordeal secret from the others. Just like in Inquisition, where Solas made up an excuse for how he had esoteric knowledge no one else had, saying he found it walking the Fade.
I've journeyed deep into the Fade in ancient ruins and battlefields to see the dreams of lost civilizations.
Rook now makes up some excuse for how they suddenly know all this stuff about Elgar'nan and Gillenane out of nowhere. Like, as a crow, I was given a contract to kill this professor of ancient elven religion, and I took a trophy from his collection of very interesting tomes that definitely exist, but please don't ask me to prove it. But Raelyn, you say, keeping a secret like that from their companions would be a terrible thing for Rook to do. And you're right, it is a terrible thing, but it's also good storytelling. And having Rook keep this connection with Solas secret would actually have fixed or at least improved a number of issues in the game. First, it would have fixed the problem with the companions knowing Rook was compromised but doing nothing about it. If they don't know their leader has had blood magic used on them, they stop looking like morons for following Rook's orders without question. They're still making the best choices they can with the information they have, they just don't have all the information. Second, rather than previous world building regarding blood magic making the story of Veilguard fall apart, that world building would now contribute to the tension in the story as Rook tries to navigate their leadership duties while keeping secrets from their team, knowing how betrayed their companions will feel if the secret ever gets out. That world building about blood magic now makes the story juicier. Third, this would explain why Rook took on a leadership role even though they believe Varric is still alive. Because the way the story is written, if Rook believes Varric is still alive, there's no reason Rook shouldn't still see Varric as the leader, even if he can't necessarily go out on field missions and has to delegate from the lighthouse. But if Rook feels very guilty and feels like they have to be the one leading the charge, then it makes Rook motivated to make excuses to force Varric to rest and take over leadership duties from him. Fourth, with a little work, this could also help explain why no one caught Rook talking to their imaginary friend Varric. Due to their shared secret, Rook would be much more clandestine when speaking to Varric. Since Varric would remind Rook of the guilt they feel over keeping a secret from their companions, Rook would also be less likely to want to speak to or about Varric in front of the other companions. Which could also help explain why the companions don't talk about Varric to Rook. If Rook makes it clear they don't want to talk about Varric, then the others might assume Rook is grieving and needs time and space from the subject. This isn't a perfect fix for this plot hole, but it goes a long way to explain why both Rook and the companions might be more hesitant to openly speak about Varric. Fifth, Rook sharing this secret with Varric would also appear to deepen their relationship, with Varric being the only one Rook can be completely honest with, making us feel more of a gut punch when Rook finds out Varric is dead. Sixth, there are several times in the game where Rook or their companions spout the same ideology as Solas. It personally made me pretty uncomfortable because it felt like the writers were sometimes praising the heroes but condemning Solas for believing in the same philosophy. Let me give you just a few quick examples so we're on the same page. If you choose to express guilt for setting the gods free, Harding and Nev will immediately waive you of any guilt, suggesting it was Solas's fault for having started the ritual in the first place, and you were really just forced to react the way you did.
They're free because of us.
They're free because of Solas.
Lace is right. If we hadn't stopped that ritual, countless people would be dead.
Even though Nev warned you disrupting the ritual could be apocalyptic, and no, look, it was. But there is very much this sentiment of, we did what we had to, even though we knew it could be very, very dangerous, because we couldn't think of another option. But even though I sympathize with the idea that Rook felt backed into a corner, didn't have time to consider what atrocities might happen, and took what seemed like the best course of action at the time, this is also the exact same excuse Solas gives when explaining why he created the Veil in the first place.
Had I not created the Veil, the Avenurus would have destroyed the entire world.
It's the exact same excuse he uses for most of his mistakes. I did what I had to when there was no better option. If I hadn't done what I did, the gods would have made things so much worse.
Do you believe that I would do this if there was some other better option?
You can't condemn Solas for this excuse and pardon Rook for the exact same excuse. As another example, Lucanus expresses views on death and killing that closely mirror views Solas expresses during the inciting incident of the game.
People are always dying. It is what they do.
While other characters in your party question Lucanus on this and don't appear to share the same belief, they're much more concerned about spite than they are that Lucanus himself has no scruples when it comes to murder. It kind of makes it seem like they don't actually have as big of a problem with murder as they pretend to, and their acceptance of Lucanus weakens their moral high ground when it comes to Solas. Next, many times in the game, Rook, and especially whichever character gets sacrificed to kill Gillenane, will say lines like,
"So let's stop the gods, whatever it takes."
No matter what.
No matter what. Just like you said in the lighthouse, Rook. We stop the gods. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. That's what you told us.
Suggesting they will accomplish their goal to stop the gods and Solas, whatever the cost. There's just one problem here. That's exactly the same philosophy that makes Solas so dangerous. This utilitarian idea that so long as the outcome is favorable enough, any cost is worth paying. This is literally exactly the whole reason they were trying to stop Solas. Having Rook and their companions spout the same ideology as Solas is hypocritical and sends mixed messages. Unless you turn Rook's and their companions' hypocrisy into a feature of the story, forcing them to face that hypocrisy over the course of the story and change their ways. Or have a downfall because they don't change. Take that hypocrisy and turn it into their character arcs. When you feature their hypocrisy, when you acknowledge it in the writing, the audience knows that you are aware of it and are much less likely to feel put off by the companions when they're being hypocrites, because the audience trusts you to address and resolve the character's hypocrisy in a satisfying way. So I would give everyone some belief that they have that they share with Solas. Take that belief that they share and tie it in somehow into the themes of pride. Over the course of their character arcs, the companions should have the opportunity to change their minds about that ideology and learn of its folly. For example, have Lucanus learn more respect for life. If, at the end of his character arc, he is prideful and executes Ilario out of ego rather than allowing him to live, have that decision negatively impact how likely Lucanus is to survive the end battle. Do something similar with every other companion. If Harding's own pride prevents her from overcoming the rage of the Titans, like how Solas can't move past the injustices that happen to the elves, have that negatively affect how useful she is likely to be in the end and how likely she is to survive. Emmerich wasn't a character who came off particularly prideful, but if we gave him a little bit of pride in his abilities and combined that with his fear that makes it difficult for him to face and accept mortality, just like how Solas can't handle the new mortality of the elven people, then have that affect Emmerich's efficacy in the final battle. You see where I'm going here? You can allow players the freedom to make these different choices in the game while still using those choices to uplift the themes of your story, no matter what decision the gamer makes. Plus, it would feel like your companions would be living or dying in the end of the game for a reason, not just because you did or didn't babysit them well enough, not just because they're too distracted by personal problems you didn't solve for them, but because they either learned something important that helped them better themselves, or because they failed to. Anyway, I just think it would be great for the writers to be aware of their ideologies that their characters are spouting and to make it make sense. Either don't have your characters be hypocrites or use that hypocrisy for some interesting storytelling. Having Rook start out the game sharing Solas's ideology makes their hypocrisy part of the point. 7th, having Rook start out believing the same ideology as Solas makes them such a fantastic vessel to explore the themes of the story in an engaging, heartfelt way. Now, if Rook feels guilty over releasing the gods, not only would that guilt become that personal connection to the plot that motivates them to deal with the problem, but if Rook was being secretive about the blood magic because their guilt made them want to be the one to defeat the gods, then Rook's story would almost perfectly mirror Solas's. Rook would be on the same journey as Solas, a prideful journey of redemption where they believe that they are the only one who can set things right, even if they have to do so through deception and putting others at risk. Rook would be learning the same lessons Solas needs to be learning. But not only would Rook keeping the blood magic a secret be useful in conveying the themes, it would also amplify other major plot points in the story, giving them more weight. Like, for example, this scene where Rook faces their regrets. This scene is what the Save the Cat method of structuring plot calls the Dark Night of the Soul. The Dark Night of the Soul is supposed to be the darkest moment in the story for Rook. It's the moment they look back on everything they've done, where they've gone wrong. The plot beat right after this is called the Break into 3, which is where Rook is supposed to finally learn the lesson the story has been trying to teach them the whole time, where they learn how to fix the damage they've caused and solve the main problem of the story. The Dark Night of the Soul and Break into 3 are two of the most critical points in stories that use this structure, because this is where the whole message of the story is finally laid out in its clearest form. Yet, the way Veilguard is currently written, these moments are weakened, because if you don't allow Rook to feel guilty for setting the gods free, then Rook has done nothing wrong that they need to correct. There's no lesson Rook has to learn here. These moments where Rook has to face their regrets become hollow, and the most important plot points in the story become extraneous, useless, vapid. However, if we emphasize Rook's guilt over the gods, and if we emphasize Rook's pride by having them keep the blood magic secret, then Rook has done wrong. Rook does have a lesson to learn here. We would get to see how an unhealthy relationship with guilt led Rook to put their team in danger all throughout the entire story so far. We would get to see how, even if Rook didn't kill Davrin or Harding themselves, Rook's leadership and ideology of doing whatever they felt was necessary to obtain their goal, even lying and keeping secrets, was part of what led to a trusted companion's death. All of these things create tension and depth and meaning in the story. The mistakes Rook makes come back to punch us in the gut and make us feel all the feels. So now, when Rook finally gets out of the regret prison, their companions would be hurt, not just by the death of a friend, but with Solas's escape from prison, the companions would also realize that their leader had been being manipulated by Solas and withheld important secrets from them. Rook would have to make amends, gathering their companions, apologizing, resolving to do better, and proving it by being fully open with their team as now they sit down to plan how to stop Elgranon and Solas. Now we see the Rook who has an open, honest leadership style, listening to their companions' advice and correction. Very likely, Rook would offer to step aside as leader, knowing that what was more important was that Elgranon was stopped, not that Rook be the one to stop him. Though their teammates are upset, they agree that, blood magic or not, they wouldn't have gotten this far without Rook's leadership. If Rook really wants forgiveness for what they've done wrong, they can prove it by leading the team through the rest of the journey, but this time with open honesty with their teammates, and not whatever the cost. Rook would set new rules. There are lines they don't cross, rules they don't break, sacrifices Rook will never ask them to make. Because of all this, when Rook is finally given the opportunity to judge Solas, they are doing so not because Rook is a perfect person who's never done any wrong, but because Rook shared the same journey of pride and regret as Solas. Even if the Inquisitor and Mythal are still needed to finally break Solas's chains, Rook would be one of the few people best equipped to be judge over Solas. If you choose to redeem Solas and help him make the right decision, you are approaching him as someone who understands, who empathizes, and who has learned a truth Solas can't see yet. It is because you can connect with and understand him in a way no other character can. But if you choose to condemn him, it is because your journey to overcome your regret allows you to see where Solas has made choices that may have corrupted him past the point of no return. You, as someone who has already learned that lesson, are uniquely qualified to judge Solas in a way others aren't. It gives much more meaning to all the possible endings for Solas, and it connects Rook much more solidly to those endings too, rather than having the Inquisitor or Mythal completely steal the spotlight. Rook's ability to connect and sympathize with Solas in ways no one else can could have just as much emotional impact in the story. Having Rook start the story out believing in the same ideology as Solas centers them so much more in the story in the beginning, middle, and end. It fixes this whole issue with the blood magic. It does so many good things for the story, and I truly love this fix in so many ways. If Veilguard had been a novel and not an RPG, I would have loved to read this book. Whew! That was a long one, but that's finally it for this video. If you made it all the way through, comment what your favorite fix I came up with is, or if you have a fix of your own, share it. I would like to hear. But I am losing my voice after all this talking, so I will see you next time.